Welcome to Emerging with Jamal Robinson, a podcast where you hear from the diverse voices behind emerging technologies and gain useful insights for positive changes in your life and career. Our guest on today's show is Brandon Middleton. Here's some non-career related questions to help you understand Brandon the person before we get into Brandon the professional.
Who do you admire the most and why?
I'd say my dad is one of my biggest inspirations. He held us down as a family of five and gave me a role model to follow in my life.
Pretty dope. What are you most proud of?
I'm proud of carrying the Middleton legacy forward. I've seen a bunch of sacrifice, a bunch of ingenuity, a bunch of just blessing come from previous generations, so I'm excited to carry that forward.
Who is your favorite musician, artist, song, or album?
I mean, I'm in love with so many, but if I had to just put it down into one, I would say Miles Davis. He's got so many phenomenal jazz records and so many different styles he touched in his career.
3 months, all expense paid travel. Where are you going?
I haven't checked out Singapore yet in detail, so I'd be really excited to take my family out there to chill in APJ, to practice my Singlish, and to eat the Singaporean food for a couple months.
Okay, I like that. What's your favorite TV show, movie, actor, or actress?
Right now, I am finishing up Succession on HBO, so I really like that story of an affluent family with the brother and sister dynamics and the dad. So I'm a big fan of that show. Actor and actress, I'd say Denzel Washington and Angela Bassett.
Okay, really great choices. What are 1 to 3 words you say defines you the best?
I'd say family, I'd say balanced, and I'd say community.
3 excellent words. If you could meet anyone throughout history, dead or alive, who would that be?
Man, Jesus is an easy first answer.
Praise
Water
God.
to wine, so many different things that I try to live by that he set an example for. Maybe in second place, Martin Luther King would be somebody I'd also love to meet.
2 great people to keep company with. If you could choose any meal as your last meal, what would that meal be?
All right, the south side of Chicago is going to come out. I'm going to pick fettuccine Alfredo and some shrimp
Okay.
on the side.
Brandon leads Web3 business development at AWS with prior business development, sales, and engineering experience across Cisco, Google, Slalom, and Microsoft. Brandon is also a professor who's lectured at both Stanford University and the University of Illinois, where he leads a course on the intersection of design, technology, and social impact. Brandon was formerly educated at the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Illinois, where he received his master's in business administration and an engineering degree. Brandon has advised companies like Twitch and Uber on their path to becoming leading tech companies and currently sits on multiple boards for advancing education, the underrepresented, and young professionals in tech. Brandon is also a father, a son, a brother, and most importantly, a man of integrity. I know you're going to enjoy today's discussion. Now on to the show.
Hey, welcome to the show today. Please introduce yourself for the listeners.
My name is Brandon Middleton. I'm from the south side of Chicago, live in the Bay Area here. I work at AWS as a Web3 business development manager, and I also am an adjunct professor at Stanford University.
Really cool. Let's maybe first get into business development. So I've had a few people on the show that were in business development. I know from my own experience it can mean a lot of different things. Can you maybe explain what business development is for you?
Yeah, sure thing. So I support crypto, blockchain, and Web3 startups at AWS, and these kinds of businesses are just getting started and need often mentorship from different folks who have been there and done that with their own startups. We create programs that serve the specific needs of Web3, blockchain, and crypto companies, which may be a little bit different than fintech or AI or healthcare types of startups. And then I also have revenue responsibilities, so I'm bringing revenue into the company by virtue of the job that I'm doing. So those are 3 different ways that we help startups, but I would kind of break it down with go-to-market and revenue responsibility for my job.
Okay. When I often hear about business development, it's not specific to startups. Is it that Web3 is such a nascent technology you have to focus on startups, or is this like a startups focused role that just so happens to be focused on Web3?
Yeah, we have a long-term approach in how we support companies, whether they're startups or whether they're established businesses. And the idea that if you meet a customer when they're early, just forming, small team, and you support them and give them the tools to be able to sustain their growth, to provide thought leadership as they're in the formative years of the company. The logic is that they'll stay with you and they'll stay loyal as they get to the next level and milestones of maturity. So I'm excited about the job I have because I get to be in it from the ground floor, and I get to see them, often launch off into IPO or, different interesting types of exit scenarios.
Very cool. And you mentioned you have a revenue responsibility. What does that mean? Like you have a quota, or you're like tracking a specific revenue that you're trying to have closed out by the end of the year, or something else?
Yeah, that means I do have a quota that I'm responsible for. That means that the way that I'm compensated is if I make the quota or exceed it, then I make more. And if I undershoot the quota and I don't make it, then I make less. So I've got mouths to feed, and I'm always aiming to be in that first category.
Now, for the people like myself at some point that are scared of quotas and are nervous about like, oh man, if I don't hit this quota, I'm not going to be able to feed my family. Like, how did you ease into it? Was it something that you had anxiety on, or was it something that immediately you're always be closing, or the ABCs came to you? Or
yeah, I've been in and around sales for a really long time, even before I got into tech. So the idea that I wasn't always quota carrying, but I was a technical part of the account team that served customers, gave me the language to be able to speak to my customers, gave me the confidence to be able to step into a more risky type of compensation plan. And the idea that technology is always changing underneath our feet, I knew as an engineer that I would not be able to sustain kind of all of my life goals while keeping up with the quickly changing tech. But the thing that would never go away was relationships and the way that you kind of nurture your bonds with people who are, your customers first, but sometimes could be your friends, could be your community members, and be your neighbors in a different context. So leaned heavy into the relationship side, and so far so good.
Okay, that's good to hear. Now, I'm kind of parsing out your answer. So I'm reading the way that you view sales is more of a relationship management. It's not that you're going and trying to like trick somebody into sales. How has that navigation been to managing the relationship, which sounds like maybe engineering previously you'd be managing the technology in absence of the relationship?
Yeah, so kind of explaining to a customer what the technical capabilities of your product are is one thing, but then being able to have the technology kind of feed into the business strategy and what the high level kind of executive goals for your customer are. Entirely different talk track, entirely different kind of philosophy, entirely different way that, you spend your time back then versus the way I spend my time now. I was never, reading MSNBC or like following stock tickers or like going into different, business reporting documents that are out there that have to be reported quarter by quarter. Whereas now, I'm following the money, all the different venture investing that's going on. I'm following policy and regulation and legislation for different jurisdictions. So, I find myself very seldom diving super deep into the tech like I used to, and more thinking like a CEO of the companies that I'm serving in order to be a thought leader and a partner to them.
And I'm sure that, or I perceive you tell people to go after the career that most intrinsically motivates them. But in addition to that, some people are heavily motivated by money. So I also hear that like sellers have a overall higher compensation plan on average when you look across roles compared to someone in engineering. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, definitely. The companies that I've worked for have been larger technology companies and less small, early stage startups. So they've had more mature compensation and commission structures that are more rewarding of the people who are taking the risk in their compensation in the way that I am. So I found that if you kind of aggregate and kind of blend all of the data, that on average, folks in my position do make a little bit more than folks coming into different functions of a company.
Okay. Was there any struggle giving up the engineering side, being deeply technical, diving into tech versus now going into like quarterly statements and Harvard Business Review and various other places?
Yeah, there's a piece of my inner engineer that still wants to roll up his sleeves and tinker and write prompts and code a little bit. So I don't have as much disposable time as I used to have. So there is a piece of me that wishes I could do more of that, but with the proliferation of different technologies and with also being a father, it's cool to be able to download some of that technology and to teach and try to represent that to my children so that they can use it in their schoolwork or, different projects that they might have going on. So I do get to lean into it from that aspect.
Okay, that is really cool. And you've had business development experience across Microsoft, Cisco, and various other companies. So can you speak about how BD transforms when you're at one company versus another, or is it pretty much the same thing regardless of company you're at?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. So it's pretty similar. They might call it different things or use different language to describe what's actually happening. But at Cisco, I remember it was build, buy, or partner. So, different M&A targets. Can we take one of these companies and plug them into our company in order to make our product portfolio kind of stretch further or, be more impactful to our customers? If you're talking about partner, for example, how can I integrate seamlessly with another, company that's out there? And by venturing to combine these two, get a 1 + 1 = 3 or a 1 + 1 = 11 type of effect where that synergy is really, really felt if you're the end customer of our joint solution. So the way that I think about it right now is more in a go-to-market type of motion. I'm helping younger companies see down the path or see around corners because this is their first time doing it or their second time doing it. So the fact that, we've been there and done that a lot on our side, and we can remove obstacles and help them to get to impact or get to value faster is what I lean more into than like the build from before or the partner from before. So same concepts, different language.
Makes a lot of sense. And thinking of, okay, at some point, Brandon Middleton, the principal engineer, best of the best, which I'm sure now you're probably the best of the best in account management for Web3. What skills did you have to gain to get from point A to point B? Like what resources did you use to educate yourself and start to make that transition for other people that want to do something similar?
Yeah, if you want to do something similar, I invite you to adopt a student always, eternal learner type of mindset. You're never going to be done learning all the skills, browsing all the sites. So you just have to be comfortable staying hungry for information and then filtering that information into useful to me, keep it close, or not useful to me, forget about it categories. I used a number of kind of learning websites. Back in the Cisco days, it was ine.com to learn networking protocols and how to configure, firewalls and routers. When I started my cloud journey at Microsoft, it was CBT Nuggets, which is a practical, easy, this is how you, in plain language, explain cloud computing to, my mom or my grandma.
I use CBT. They're really good.
Yeah. And then these days, there are companies out there. A Cloud Guru is another one that I have used and recommended people to for the type of work that I'm doing. But the idea that you're always going to be teaching and giving value to your customers, but then also being the student and maybe paying another platform in order to hone your language, in order to kind of get your communication to a point where it's not like you got to be a rocket scientist to be able to understand kind of what I'm putting down to you as a customer. So those are a couple of resources that I've enjoyed. Again, with my teaching, I've leaned pretty hard into the different resources that academics lean into. So I check into the research and pull from that as well.
Really great answer. And I know through your history, I can look on your resume, it's like 12 certifications. So you kind of are a perpetual learner in addition to being a professor. So can you maybe speak to the value you've seen in your career from constantly going out after you've gotten your graduate and undergraduate degree and keep adding that additional levels of certification and knowledge to your skills?
Yeah. One thing I found interesting is that as you work with customers, the number of certifications or the number of kind of technical acrobats and gymnastics that you've done just on the side, maybe they're not even a part of your actual job, the more trust you earn quicker and the more kind of put up on a pedestal you are. So even from the Cisco days when I would tell people how many certifications or which certifications I had, whether we went down that rabbit hole and we did stump the chump or did the speeds and feeds conversation, it was a trust, a respect, a validation that came at a much earlier point for me by virtue of having that. So that would be like the value of having them in kind of the professional kind of sales and having customers types of context. I would say outside of that, it allows you to pivot into and out of different jobs with a little bit more certainty, a little bit more of a leg up on maybe your competition who doesn't have those things as accolades. And that was something that is very useful to me, because I know that, after 2 to 3 years in doing one particular thing, I'm going to want to try on something new, pivot into something different. And often, you can speak to your experiences in getting that certification or doing that project. It's a very structured way to kind of walk through a new learning journey.
I view sailors as people that have a lot of confidence, specifically the ability to go out and hear no so many times and still come back and ask for a yes for a third or fifth time is, for me, very difficult. But I'm curious, how did you build this confidence to be in the sales role and go out and deal with rejection?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Again, before I was quota carrying and had my own quota, I was paired up with these account managers who had this. So I was given a front row seat to other people kind of practicing and doing this for many, many years. So I think that was one thing that definitely helped me to get the reps in, even though it didn't impact kind of my pockets at the time. I got to see what good looked like and what great looked like, and then adapt some of those things to my own game. Nowadays, the technology, again, under our feet has changed quite a bit, but a lot of the characteristics and the things that you're trying to accomplish are still the same. You're trying to understand what your customer is looking to do in the near and the long term. So you're trying to also quantify what value means to them and march your team as fast as possible toward that value. It could be a perception and political thing internal to their company. It can be a speaking engagement, at an industry event. Finding out what is actually valuable to the person on the other side of the table from you is something that I've learned a lot about, and often getting to that as a win for them is even more important than getting to the revenue number that you might personally be responsible for. So those are a couple of examples.
Okay. If I could maybe summarize that. So it sounds like you got into a kind of sales adjacent role, like a cloud solution architect that allowed you to see the sales operation, so you got more comfortable with it. And it also sounds like you are engaging in building a relationship. So now it's more of a conversation and not you stepping to the table saying, hey, do you want this thing? Yes or no? And then having to walk away. It's more, hey, we don't need this right now, but come back in 3 months. Or, hey, we do need this, but tweak this thing. And it makes it less fearful because it's not rejection as much as a conversation.
Yeah, sales in itself, technical sales, has changed a lot in the last 20 years. So if you think about being in the hardware business and ordering a rack of Cisco equipment or physical computers or storage devices, the kind of creation of SaaS and the proliferation of cloud have shortened the amount of time that it takes for a purchaser to get value out of that investment. So there's not as much of a learning curve anymore. There's, less lock-in and there's more choice out in the market. So we as salespeople and business development people have adapted to the way that things are to kind of get to this happy place that we're in right now. And again, with the proliferation of AI and some other emerging technologies, I'm expecting that to change even within the course of the next 1, 2, 3 years. So we're adaptable above all else.
Yes, no, you have to be. And I want to say the SaaS model also brought along the customer success model, where, because to your point, now you have a shortened cycle between, you say, I guess, when customers can realize value, but also when customers can churn and go to your competitors. A lot of emphasis has to be on the relationship now. You can't just go sell something and walk away. So really great transition into your life and experience. Maybe switching to your personal life, because I know you do so many things, and you mentioned the family and professor and so forth, which professor's not quite your personal life, but I'd love to hear how you got into being an educator, specifically where you teach at. I already know, and I'm really impressed, but maybe letting other people know too.
Sure. So I teach at the Stanford Design School. It's called the D School on campus. And this is my 6th year teaching there. And it actually happened maybe divine blessing, or maybe you attribute it to something else. But the idea is that another guy from the south side of Chicago named Jason Maiden, he graduated from the business school at Stanford, and he was Nike's first black designer intern. And he went from intern to the vice president of the whole brand for Jordan brand internationally. And he basically stayed on a year after graduating from the business school to be a fellow at this D school. So 7 years ago, he invites me and a couple of other black and brown guys to come onto campus and do an event whereby we invite a lot of the underrepresented talent here in the Bay Area to Stanford's campus and just build community with them, show them that there is kind of a path for them if they're interested in becoming kind of the next Jasons or the next Brandons or the next Jamals. And many Stanford kind of professors and people kind of lined the outsides of the walls as we were doing our thing for that event. And they're like, how did they get all these? Like, these aren't really our, usual types that we see at Stanford. We like what they're doing. So whatever we can do to extend the runway for this kind of stuff, we want to give them resources. So that 1 day, 2 day workshop turned into something that was a week-long seminar. A week-long seminar turned into a 6-week pop-out course. And then after the pop-out course, I got invited to be on the teaching team of an actual quarter-long class. So that was like 6 years ago, and I've continued to say yes to be on different teaching teams. So I teach different topics, but yeah, it's been a blessing this whole time, man.
Yeah, and I find that as a professor, there's certain things that make you gravitate towards education. But like for me, I love the ability to mentor. What are some of the things that like attract you to teaching?
Yeah, I like, on the work side of things, there's one part of your brain that you're using, but when you teach and when you lean into design, you're actually using the other side, which I really like. To one of my, keywords of balance earlier in the segment here. So the fact that I can use and bring my whole self to a day's work, part of that being here at the job, and then the other part of that maybe being on campus, is something that helps me feel fulfilled and helps me feel like I'm giving God a return on the blessings and the stuff that he's put inside of me. And then to your point, I really love the mentoring and coaching and the energy the students bring to the different courses. They bring an international kind of viewpoint on things that is even insightful to me, having mostly just lived in the United States. They come from LATAM, they come from kind of Asia Pacific, they come from Europe, and they tell these stories that I'm not privy to because I've never lived their lives and walked in their shoes. So the idea that we've just got this opportunity to exchange and have this beautiful dialogue for 10 weeks is like, man, they're paying me to do this. I would do, don't tell them, I might do this for a lot less, but I really appreciate the
Hopefully
opportunity.
they're not watching, because he'll do it for free. So it's a message to take away.
Yeah.
Really cool. Do you find that like any university, because I know you taught across most, is any university a good place to go teach because it's an institution of education with small nuances, or is there, for somebody looking at potential universities, are there stark differences with one university like Stanford, which may be well-funded, versus, we just call out Austin Peay in Clarksville, Tennessee, may or may not have the resources? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I've been very impressed with the amount of resources. Stanford is what was classified as a tier 1 research institution. So this means that their faculty and their postdocs and their graduate students can go and write these large grants and proposals and receive funding from any number of organizations, and that they've got the vehicle on campus and the administration to take the money and put it to use, and they've got the compliance checks and all of the infrastructure needed in order to do that level of research. Not every university has that. So if you're tier 1 or if you're under that, you might have some of the brightest minds in the world, but you might be cut off from even applying for those funds because you don't have that classification. So when I started teaching at Stanford, I had no idea that I was sitting basically at the top of the pyramid as opposed to somewhere in the middle or on the bottom. But I have come to appreciate kind of the level of blessing that it is to be able to have an idea, and if I wanted to, take a group of students and actually apply for something that we qualify for by virtue of the university having the status that it has. So one of the ideas that I have in the future is to be able to tap on a couple of HBCUs and see like how we can up level and upskill the existing HBCUs that we have in the United States to get to that level, so that our brothers and sisters can apply for some of these resources and do cool things as well.
Very amazing answer. I'm thoroughly impressed. I'm curious, as I listen to you talk, like I can tell God's been a part of your life, and I'm assuming that you've had like some amazing parents, or during your formative years, you've had like some kind of assistance to get to this place now. Can you maybe talk about your upbringing and kind of the support you have, your current family versus a family you grew up with, and others?
I tell people I grew up from the south side of Chicago. But what that really means is I'm from the south suburbs, because people in California have no idea where, Richmond Park or Matson or Olympia Fields, Illinois is. So, I grew up in the south of the suburbs. I was actually born in Chicago, but did most of my elementary school, high school there in the burbs. And then after that, I went down to University of Illinois to get my engineering degree. And then after that is when I came to California. But those formative years, I grew up in a Christian household. I had 2 younger sisters. I was the oldest. My father was an active member of our church. We actually went to church across state lines in Gary, Indiana, home of Michael Jackson, and a number of the kind of steel industry kind of businesses that were prominent in the 50s and 60s. And it gave me an appreciation, kind of that Midwesterners like work ethic. Things in California cost a whole lot, but you never forget like where you came from. So you think about budgeting and getting a return on your hard-earned dollars that you've been blessed with, and just the values, like a moral compass to stand on, super like useful as I transitioned from Illinois to California. So, both my parents have been working for 40 something years, and I'm hoping that they retire sooner rather than later, so that they could help with these grandchildren. Come on out to California and help your boy out.
Their son with multiple salaries from Stanford and Amazon, I think, has enough to retire them. So to that point, now you're working multiple jobs, you have a family that you're also trying to like be a present father, husband, son, like all these different roles. How do you balance that out? Because someone else could be like intimidated with picking up a second job, and the first one, and I can imagine that Amazon is pretty intense.
I kind of move forward through a concept I've come to know as intentional congruence. So all of the stuff that I'm driving towards, whether it's professionally, whether it's academics, whether it's family, there are many instances where you can do one thing that has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 effects in just that same kind of motion or that same action. An example of that would be an event that's aimed at, bringing underrepresented people into kind of the STEM career, visibility or knowledge, right? So we might host an event at Amazon in this building, and we want to bring nonprofits or community organizations into our space in order to talk about internships or job opportunities. And then there might be a grant at Stanford that is looking to create some level of financial support for this said demographic of people. So in doing one event, I might be able to host it at my employer's workplace, go and grab campus resources to fund the ideas from the nonprofit kids that are coming to this. And I've got a 3-in-1 type of impact out of a 2-hour, 3-hour program that I might have done. So this kind of foresight, or this thinking, how can things line up in order to make the maximum amount of impact? A friend of mine called it intentional congruence a couple years ago. So I've kind of used those 2 words to try to define kind of my strategy as I move all these things forward at the same time.
Have either of you all copyrighted that name? Because if not, I might have to call my lawyer really quick.
Shout out to Esther Ayarende, who gave me I think she was the first person to use those 2 words together. So hopefully she's got something on it.
If the lawyers are listening, first to him, but I said it back in '84 when I was thinking about this back in the day. But and it also sounds like, not that you said it this way, but you're essentially getting your employers and your work to kind of work in synergy with you to essentially do things that are beneficial to them, but also beneficial to you, which is reducing the amount of work you have to do if you did it all separately. You're just bringing all that together and finding companies in secondary jobs or secondary activities that all just kind of align, and everybody's better off, and they enrich your experience too. Sounds like another important part. You wouldn't be able to get maybe the access to some of the same spaces if you weren't at Amazon, or vice versa. You wouldn't have the same resources if you weren't at Stanford.
Exactly. Like, even with a lot of the larger problems that we have as society, I see organizations and human beings not working together in collaboration as the reason that we haven't achieved or we haven't accomplished the end of homelessness or poverty or, any number of the other things that society as a macro have issues with. So the idea that you're kind of taking organizations or taking communities of people and actually putting them together in order to achieve something as a team is, again, the way that I just see things, the way that I live my life. And maybe it's because, teaching at the D school, I teach, business school students, I teach law school students, I teach engineers, I teach kind of folks from all over. And you have to kind of set the goals early in the quarter, and you have to basically make sure that everybody's comfortable with the language and comfortable with the end objective as we kind of move an entire cohort of different types of people through a process in order to teach them something, but then in order to accomplish a goal, at the end of, 10 weeks of time.
Okay. Really well said. Maybe two more questions as we're running short on time, and I know you're a busy man. I see that you also participate as a board member on the Silicon Valley Education Foundation and the Street Code Academy. I know a lot of people are not familiar with being on a board and what that means. Can you maybe at a high level talk about what a board member is, what they do, how you got on one, and what you see the value of being on the board is?
Yeah. So being on a board has been really transformative. I've met people that probably outside of this interaction would never have crossed paths with each other. And the idea that you are helping to steer an organization down a path and helping it to achieve its mission over the course of time is the thing that appealed to me when I first started to do this board work. The reason that I did it is because, corporations and nonprofits operate with boards as governance. And a lot of people, before they step into corporate board, governance, they're doing it on the nonprofit scale for many years and able to show success in that nonprofit organization over many years. They have very similar kind of functions. Like, I'm on the finance committee at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. They have a nominating and governance committee to add new board members. They have, a technical component to them. They have programs. They have all these different teams. And the idea that I could practice that and make an organization bigger and better and serve more children, year by year, that'll correlate really nicely when I get to the point in my career where I want to maybe focus a little bit more on corporate board governance. So, if anybody's on the fence about it, I would encourage you to find a friend that might be on one, find a mentor or a sponsor that could recommend one that really aligns with the things that you want to do in your future. And it's a lot of work, but it's definitely beneficial to be able to say you had a hand in helping to achieve, again, the mission of that nonprofit.
Really well said. The last question I have for you, and thank you for coming out to the show. It's been a really amazing, you've packed so much information into such a short period of time. So I really appreciate that. Last question is around what's next for you? Where can people reach out to you, stay abreast of the things you're working on?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Telegram, all three of those platforms is BRMiddle, so BRMiddle. You'll find me on campus at Stanford University pretty much 3/4 out of the year. And then at the University of Illinois, I do some online teaching there. It's my alma mater. So I'm there a couple times a year. But then here in the Bay Area, I'm just trying to make sure that these kids that I have are well prepared, that they're thinking global and not just local. And again, that they have this moral compass, kind of a respect for, every walk of life, every ethnicity, every culture. And we've got a lot of work to do as human beings to make this thing sustainable. So you could find me at the intersection of technology, of crypto, blockchain, Web3 stuff, and and education. I think whether I hit Powerball like tomorrow and hit it big, or whether I keep kind of down the path of my regular career, you'll always find me at the intersection of those three things.
Love that. And maybe parting words, any last advice you'd give for anyone that wants to be the Brandon Middleton, the stand-up father, or Brandon Middleton, the Web3 business development person, or the board member, or any of the other roles that you carry?
Yeah, I'd say stay curious, be kind, and always pay it forward. There are people who opened doors for me early in my career. There was never a dumb question as I walked into their office and tried to figure things out. There are a lot of people now that come and ask questions or like try to approach me on LinkedIn or these different platforms, and carving out a piece of your day or a piece of your week dedicated to helping kind of the next Jamal, the next Brandon, the next, folks who are in our position to make it on. And I think that's what it's all about. Like generation to generation, if we keep doing that, then I think we'll keep rising over time.
Well said. And with that, thank you for coming on to the show, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
Thank you.
That wraps our conversation. Many thanks to Brandon for sharing his story and for the gems of knowledge he dropped during our discussion. I end each show with an inspirational quote. Today's quote reads, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is a true goal of education," which comes from the American Baptist minister, activist, and prominent civil rights leader, Martin Luther King Jr. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast, and leave a rating and review, as it really helps to amplify the message so others can discover this content and benefit from it. And we'd love more user-submitted quotes. I plan to read them at the end of each show. Instructions on how to submit those quotes are in the show notes. That's all for today's show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, peace